Welcome back to part 5A of the Style Creator for Beginners series. In this video, I'll be taking a look at this section here, which says source root chord or play root chord depending on the target channel you've got selected at default. If you're not familiar with Style Creator and you haven't watched the other videos in the series, please feel free to watch parts 1 to 4 first, just so you can have a better understanding of the other functions within Style Creator, as this section will have references to those other functions at some point within the video. So in the last video, I mentioned that whenever we make a style, everything we record via the recording channel becomes what's known as the source pattern. For example, if we pick any style at random and open that up in Style Creator and press play, what you're actually hearing is a source pattern for that style, and the term source pattern will be used frequently throughout this video. We can change a lot of the parameters within Style Creator after we've recorded to the various channels for our source pattern, things such as tempo, the groove, dynamics and so on. But the source root chord is the one thing we need to set or make sure that it's right before recording. It will physically let you change the setting after recording, but doing so will cause problems with playback, so this needs to be set before recording, and we'll see why in a minute. You may have noticed that I've made a few basic styles in previous videos and never once altered this setting. But that's because when you initialize a style or you delete a channel, the channel reverts to its default setting of CM7. And when I've recorded to the channels when creating my source patterns, I've been recording notes that suit the CM7, so I've never had to change this setting. But this will all make sense by the end of the video. When I press the source root chord or the play root chord button, one of these two windows will pop up. Whilst a knowledge of music theory isn't necessarily vital here, it does help a lot. You have the bass note or the root note of the chord, say for example C. Then the rest of the notes form the structure or type of chord, say for instance C major. We can see within this window that we have the option to select a variety of chords, and we can change the root note and the structure to form lots of different chords. So for the correct description of what this section does, I'll loosely quote the reference manual and explain each part in a little bit more detail. The settings here determine the original key of the source pattern, which is the key used when recording your pattern to the channels other than the rhythm channels. The default setting is CM7, which means the source root is C and the source chord is M7. When initialize style is pressed from the basic tab, the setting here will default to the CM7. Deleting a channel will also cause this setting to default back to CM7 if it's previously been changed to another source root chord. Selecting CM7 as a source root chord means that when you play a CM7 in the style control section of the keyboard, it will play back the originally recorded data. Depending on the elected chord type specified, the playable notes differ. So let's look at these explanations in a little bit more detail. If we take one of the onboard Yamaha styles for easy reference and select various chords in the style control section of the keyboard, style plays pretty much how you would expect it to when making chord changes. When we create a style, we don't compose the style parts in every single chord possible. We just need to record each channel in one particular chord of our choosing, and this in turn becomes part of the source pattern. When we then play through the various chords in style control, the Genos uses some kind of wizardry to look at the source pattern we recorded and then convert that source pattern to play in such a way depending on which chords we press. I honestly don't know the programming magic behind how the Genos works this out, but I always imagine it to be like this. And for transparency, it might not work anything like this in reality, but hopefully it'll help to explain the importance of the source pattern being recorded in the correct source root chord. So we know by default the source root and source chord is CM7, so I'll not change that. If I record some piano to the chord 1 channel with a CM7 structure and play it back within style control, according to the reference manual, when I play a CM7 chord, it will play back the original pattern. The Genos is programmed in such a way that once it knows how the source pattern's been recorded, it can then transpose this pattern to suit all the other chord options available. That's all well and good, but for this to work, we as users need to ensure that if we select CM7 as a source root chord, that we actually play a CM7 chord, or use suitable notes that are recommended to be used when source root chord is set to CM7. And the same applies to any source root chord that we use. If I have the source root chord set to CM7, but I record notes for the source pattern in F major, for instance, this happens. When I press the CM7 chord, it plays back the original source pattern as it's supposed to, but the problem here is that I'm pressing a CM7 chord and it's playing in F major. And if I press an F major chord, I think it's playing a B flat. Whilst there are some scenarios where this may be recorded like this purposely, for the majority of our recordings we want to be pressing down a CM7 chord and have a CM7 source pattern playing. The default setting is CM7 and there are reasons for this. For instance, we can record certain notes in a CM7 that we can't in a standard C major, and this can be really noticeable when playing certain riffs or arpeggios. The key of C is also one of the easier keys to record to because of the nature of the chord structure. There is a certain skill required to be able to record all of the various parts of your style in CM7, but it's not vital to do so. Chords are normally fairly straightforward, but if you have a particular riff or arpeggio that you only know in a particular key, and you aren't able to transpose that to a CM7, you can simply record it in a key that you know, and the Genos will transpose it accordingly once you're playing in style control. The thing to be aware of is just making sure that you not only select the correct route, but also the select chord too, because choosing incorrectly may mean that your riff won't play as expected during chord changes. And also note that if you record things in a different key within Style Creator, and press play to listen back to what you've recorded as a whole source pattern, it will likely sound a bit odd if it's playing alongside other channels if they've been recorded in a different key. But this will all correct itself once you come out of Style Creator and Genos works its magic in style control. If you remember in my previous video, part 5, the introduction to SFF Edit, I created a simple arpeggio that didn't quite go as planned. I wanted to play an arpeggio pattern ascending from F major to A major, but things went a bit pear-shaped. That's because I had the source root chord set to CM7, but I recorded the arpeggio with an F major pattern. So when I played the CM7 chord in style control, it played back the original F major source pattern. So let's fix that. I'll play the same pattern again, but this time I'll play the notes in a CM7 pattern. When I played the F major last time, it sounded like this. For the same pattern in a CM7, I can't just transpose it down a few steps. I need to actually alter the structure ever so slightly to give me the correct notes for the CM7. Otherwise, when I change to various other C chords, there's a chance some notes won't be transposed correctly. Now when I play back the CM7 chord, it plays back my CM7 source pattern. And because the Genos now knows that my source pattern's in CM7, if I select different chords, it'll make the necessary adjustments and hopefully they play back as expected. If I play the F major, like on the previous video, it now plays as intended, and so does the G major. The A minor does play an A minor this time, but you can hear the notes don't ascend from the G major. But that's okay because I haven't changed the relevant settings in the high key note limit yet, and I'll cover that in the high key note video. If we scroll through the target channel, we can see that after initializing a style, source root chord appears on every channel apart from the rhythm channels. This is set as default for a very good reason. When we record our drums and percussion, we use specific notes on the keyboard. If these notes became transposed by the Genos during playback, the instruments would change, like this. To prevent that from happening, the rhythm channels are given specific NTR/NTT settings which stops the Genos from transposing these channels during playback. These can be changed, so just be careful when making any changes within Style Creator. And as always, check the target channel when you're editing to prevent any accidental changes. We can also use the same settings that the rhythm channels have on the other channels, and I'll cover that in the NTR/NTT video and go over the reasons why you might want to use these settings. So moving on to number 2. Whenever we initialize a style or we delete a channel, source root chord defaults to CM7. This is something to be aware of. If you plan on just using CM7 for all of your channel recordings, you never need to worry about this. But if you want to record a section in a different key, then you need to make those changes before you start recording to that particular channel. Likewise, if you record to the channel and make a mistake and decide to delete and re-record, you'll need to change this setting again because it will default back to CM7. It can be a bit of a hassle having to keep changing the setting if you're constantly deleting and re-recording. This is fairly straightforward. If we leave CM7 as the default source root chord and record our pattern, when we exit Style Creator and play a CM7 in Style Control, it plays back the source pattern as it was recorded. If you change the source root chord to something else and record a pattern, then you have to play that chord to replay the source pattern as it was recorded. So for example, if I use the default CM7 and record this, and then select a CM7 chord in Style Control, it plays back as it was recorded. If I change the source root chord to F and record the same pattern, I'll have to play an F chord for it to play the pattern as it was recorded. When we select a source root chord, each selection comes with a recommended set of playable notes to ensure that when we record our pattern and play it back later, not only will the correct chord or pattern play, but we'll be giving the Genos the best chance possible of transposing all of the notes correctly when we make chord changes. On the last video, I mentioned about having a set of notes by my desk to help me when using Style Creator. This section of the reference manual is something that I keep close by because it has all of the notes that I should be using when I'm deciding on which source root chord to record in, and lists all of the other recommended notes that I can use. The reference manual here provides us with this section which shows us which notes are playable when a C chord is selected. Playing a chord or a pad channel is usually fairly straightforward and the notes are listed here on this sheet. The tricky part is usually when you're playing a melody or arpeggio, and sometimes it can end up being a bit of trial and error. It's also worth noting that ultimately, Style Creator is quite limited, and there will be a lot of things that simply can't be done as you'd want it to be. You'll notice here that it says when the parameters for the selected target channel are set to NTR root fixed, NTT type bypass, or NTT bass off, the parameters here are changed to play root and play chord, respectively. In this case, you can change chords and hear the resulting sound for all the channels. I'll be covering the NTR NTT setting in another video, but the settings for the rhythm channels are set up in such a way that instead of source root chord shown here, it'll say play root chord. Whilst in the rhythm section, I can actually change the play root or play chord settings to hear how things sound throughout the range of chords. This is one way I can check to see if everything transposes properly throughout the various chords. So to summarise, if you're recording in CM7 then you can pretty much leave this section alone, but if you want to record in a different key, make sure to apply the changes here first and don't forget to reapply changes if you're deleting channels. Triple check your target or recording channel too, because as I mentioned many times before, it's very easy to flick through all the options and not realise the target or the recording channel has changed. It's really important that your recordings match the source root chord selected to avoid any transposing errors when changing chords later on. Unless of course there's a particular reason not to. As always, practice by composing a really basic source pattern and listen to how things change when you play through the various chords. Style Creator isn't straightforward, and if you try and create complex patterns from the beginning, it can often become quite confusing when things don't quite go as planned. So try and keep things simple to start with and have fun creating. So I'll make a really simple style, and I'll use a couple of different root chord settings just to highlight how simple it is to record using something other than the default CM7. For the rhythm, the source root chord is locked using the NTR NTT settings, so that when we change chords nothing will get transposed. So it's simple enough to record a short rhythm without having to worry about the source root chord settings. For the bass channel, again easy enough to leave as CM7, as it's not a complicated pattern, it's basically just a repeated root note. Whenever I use chords or pads, I always use a full chord structure, and I always use the default CM7 source root chord setting. You can obviously record in any source root chord you wish, but I seem to have had more luck with my styles transposing as intended when I've recorded using the CM7. I'm not sure why, but I'm convinced it's having that extra 7th note in there that seems to help when I've transposed into the more bizarre chords available. For the phrase 1 channel, I record a simple melody using a source root chord in F major. Unfortunately, there isn't a set of recommended notes in the manual, as they only list the notes for C. This is where music theory obviously comes in handy, but it's worth noting that although the reference manual lists all the recommended notes for each chord, I often find myself using notes that aren't listed in any chord combination. Most of the time, I don't have any issues, but occasionally I'll find that some chords don't always transpose with all of the melody notes as expected. In these instances, I usually just experiment, and if everything works well enough with the chords that I need for the song that I'm playing, I'm happy. Depending on how and what notes you're recording, you're not always guaranteed perfect transpositions every time, and Yamaha do make you aware of this in the reference manual. If I play back the source pattern in Style Creator and set all the channels to green, then I can listen to the style transposed to CM7. If a channel is in recording mode, then you can hear it reverts back to the source root chord that it was recorded in. You can also listen to how the chord changes will sound using the rhythm channel play root chord setting. Now I haven't altered any of the other settings in the SFF edit section, as I haven't covered them yet, But the key to getting everything to sound correct from the start is just to make sure that everything is recorded correctly in relation to the source root chord that you set.